Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Pacific Coast Bond. Today we have none other than the Bond Vivant himself, Mr. Blair Ballard. Blair, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm I'm fine. Congratulations to you both. So you and Ali, you get on your engagement. It was great news to hear from the UK.
That first off, I'm going to say thank you for the warm reception on the engagement part. And thank you for once again for coming on. Like, this is huge. And this is the culmination of a restart for me. So thank you for taking the time.
I'm honored. First guest. I'm really privileged. Thanks so much for having me on.
For this episode, we will be discussing some of the iconic brands of Bond, James Bond, and what we would like to see Bond utilize for Bond 26 and beyond. The first category we will be discussing is more than none other than vehicles, more specifically, Aston Martin versus Lotus. Now, Blair, is it safe to say when you think James Bond, one of the things that comes to mind is easily Bond's famous Aston Martin DB5?
Well, of course. I mean, it's an absolute icon. I mean, it's the most famous car in the world. My dad had an Aston Martin DB6, so not quite the DB5, but very, very similar styling, and it was absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, of course, it's the car you instantly think of when you think of Bond and cars. Aston Martin springs to mind. However, I was born in 1971, so I'm a Roger Moore kind of. I grew up with Roger Moore, so Lotus Esprits do kind of like chime a bit more with me. I just thought the obviously the Spy Love Me was the first Bond film I saw in the cinema, so that made a huge impression. The Lotus Esprit S1, the white, wet Nelly, absolutely iconic as well. But taking it a step further, my probably my favorite Bond car is the sort of copper metallic Lotus Esprit Turbo that was used in For Your Eyes Only. I just think it just looks so epically cool when it's pulling into Cortina into the car park by the skating rink, and it's just the angles and the light. It just looked epically cool, and I was really lucky enough to be able to drive a Bond Lotus Esprit S1 and the Copper Fire Metallic one on the Top Gear test track for one of my videos. It was just probably one of the best days of my life. It was just so cool. So yes, Aston Martin, I love them. I've got a lot of history with Aston as well, but I don't know. For me personally, I'm a Lotus Esprit kind of guy, but I think I'm in the minority. I think most people would plump for a DB5 if they were given any car to have in their garage. I mean, what about you, Brian? What's your take on it?
I'm gonna say you're definitely in the minority on that one. I think I'm gonna
Yeah.
just cut you off there, but I do agree with you though. When you see the Turbo Esprit, the copper red one, pull up in Cortina, it's absolutely one of the most stunning scenes, and especially with all white snow in the backdrop and just Cortina just sitting there. It makes for your eyes only, for your eyes only.
Very cool. I mean, the guy who owned the well, both in fact both Lotuses at the time. He's actually sold the copper car now, the turbo, but he wants to take it with the new owner down to Cortina. We were going to do it over the summer, but we couldn't get our ducks in a row and get the timings right. But we're hopefully going to do it next summer, not the winter time, unfortunately, with the snow, but still take it to Cortina and do a sort of homage road trip to pay homage to For Your Eyes Only in a Lotus Esprit Turbo with the skis on top and everything else. It was just we're going to get it sorted out. So that's going to be a video to look out for.
Oh, I can't wait to look out for that. And I know, the Bond Vivant alone is one of those solidifies you go almost anywhere that Bond goes. And that's what makes your channel special. You're living like Bond one day at a time. So I
Oh,
gotta tip
thank
my
you.
hat off to you if I were to wear one. So
I think you'd rock a Trilby. I reckon a Doctor No Trilby would definitely sit well with you, matey.
oh, I appreciate you saying that, but I personally don't. So but you also asked what car I would honestly take, and it would also not be the DB5, and especially from Aston Martin, it would personally be the V8.
Yeah, what from the Living Daylights, the Aston V8 from the 80s. I mean, again, that is such an epic car. I mean, The Living Daylights is one of my favorite Bond films. In the Snow again, obviously, but I was lucky enough. I went to the Christie's 60th anniversary Bond auction back in October last year, and I got the chance to sit in the homage V8 Vantage they used, the Aston they used for No Time to Die that Daniel Craig used in the, when he's pulling out of the garage and skids around, and then it's just one of the coolest cars, and the first true British supercar. So yeah, I completely get. I would probably take that in over a DB5. If you say pick an Aston Martin, I would definitely go for the V8. So I'm with you on that one, definitely.
Yeah, the V8 holds just a special heart. Like at first, I'll tell you this, I was not a huge fan of the Living Daylights. Absolutely,
Okay.
it took a long time for me to grow fond of that, and I think it took during actually COVID, to be honest. But seeing it now in like No Time to Die, and then jumping backwards into the Living Daylights, it is an absolutely stunning car. And once again, you gotta fulfill actually a childhood dream pretty much of sitting in a car that was driven by a Bond, was also driven by, I should say, two Bonds for that matter, but it also had a Bond girl, or two Bond girls, I should say. Correct me again. You had Miriam Dabo, and then you also had
But Mariam Dabo, yeah, I
yeah.
met her, interviewed her at Lock and Co. I sat down and she was doing a. They were opening a special little area at the back of Lock and Co. Hatters. If you ever go to London, you must go and check them out. They're brilliant. Oldest shop, one of the oldest shops in the world, the oldest hatters in the world. But they have an area at the back that's normally set aside for some of their oldest hats. They did a recreation of the hat they made for Nelson. Amazing sort of historical hats and but they actually set aside for a Bond display, which they did a video on, and Mariam Dabo opened that. And I took her to one side, and we actually had a separate interview. I was there with her for about an hour, chatting about the Living Daylights and her family and what life was like on set. And it was just, she is the most warm and lovely person. She's got such a great buzzy, bubbly personality. She was great fun, and obviously I mean, having starred in the Living Daylights and being in the Aston as well, and the cello scene was great fun as well afterwards when they detonate the Aston. But moving forward, for I mean, so is your initial question? Is it about what we should be looking for Bond 26 car wise? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I would actually honestly have to say yes. I think it ideally that's what we are looking for. And we saw the Aston Martin debut in 1964. And then we saw Lotus come into play with two different color variations. We talked about the white one, and we talked about the red one, of course. But Lotus truly has not returned to the series since. Do you think Lotus needs to make a comeback?
Well, I mean, I think there is a slight problem here because of the current crop of cars that they make, the Lotus are making. Obviously, they've joined forces with Geely, the Chinese manufacturers who own Volvo and other companies as well. The problem they've got is the only combustion engine car they've got left is the Emira, and that's a V6, and they've got a four-cylinder engine as well. And I mean, we're realistically looking at least sort of 2026 before the next Bond film comes out. Will the Emira is, I've seen one in the flesh and parked up, it looks absolutely epic. I mean, it's very small, but it's actually got lots of presence for a car of that price bracket. It looks like a supercar. But by the time the Bond film comes out, will it be too kind of like ubiquitous? Will there be too many of them on the road? And the only other cars they've got in the range are electric cars. So you've got the Electre four-wheel drive SUV kind of style one, which is very fast and very expensive. And then you've got the Avaya, which is the hypercar electric car that they're bringing out, but that might be just a bit too over the top for Bond, I think, even though it's ridiculously fast. Then you've got the EMEA. They've all sound so similar. The Emira, the Avaya, the EMEA, the Electric. But the EMEA is basically a kind of like a Hyper GT version lower down of the Electric SUV. So four-seater, I think. GT car. I mean, still got 905 horsepower, very, very fast, but it's a kind of like a GT, I don't know if that's really going to sit well with Bond. And I know we've got to move on, we've got to move past the combustion engine, and we've got to look to a greener future. But I don't know if I can really, honestly, hand on heart, see Bond driving electric car at the moment anyway. So maybe if we are going to go thinking about Lotus, we could think about what they did with Daniel Craig and flashbacks to using cars from the past. So they brought obviously the Aston V8 back for him to drive. Maybe for the next Bond they could bring back the Lotus Turbo Esprit and have that as his kind of like side hustle car, which he has in his own personal collection in his garage to use, maybe with a few gadgets, maybe a copper fire metallic for your eyes only car, but with the gadgets that Luigi Ferrara is not allowed to touch the buttons for. Maybe there's, I don't know, maybe it could be a hydrofoil or something on the water, that above the water instead of underwater. Maybe that could be quite a good idea. But of the current crop of cars, and the fact that the Emira is going to be the last petrol car, the last combustion engine car, I don't know if Lotus is really going to do it using their modern day car. So it'll have to be a flashback for me personally. Aston Martin are sort of clinging on to the combustion engine, which is great for us petrol heads like me. But then you have to think, okay, well, what have we got? There's going to be a new Vantage coming out probably next year or two, which might be quite cool. But is it going to be powerful enough, sexy enough? The DBS obviously was used by Nomi, and I think that's gone by the by. But there is the 770 Ultimate version of that car, which was in limited run. They did it right at the end, which was really great. Apparently, amazing to drive. They tweaked the suspension and everything else, and that was really cool to drive. Probably the ultimate old school V12 Aston. But that said, there are a couple of cars that might fit. I mean, you've got the Valhalla and the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is a sort of hypercar for the track, really. I think that's too extreme for Bond to use, a bit too out there, a bit like the Avira is for Lotus, a bit too left field. Then you got the Valhalla, which actually it had a cameo, didn't it, in No Time to Die? It was like stationary with talking, Ray Fiennes talking on the phone, and it was there in the background. So maybe they could have that actually featuring in the next film, possibly. Then also, but for me, the Victor would be absolutely brilliant. I don't know if you remember seeing it was a one-off for a special Aston Martin client. It was emulating the old V8 and the monster or the beast or whatever it's called from the 70s. Really big. It had the engine from the 177, hypercar, massive engine, V12, manual gearbox, looked brilliant, but it was a one-off, so I don't know if they could get that into the film. But they're releasing 110 cars to kind of celebrate the last hurrah for the V12. They're called the Valor, and they kind of borrow design elements from the Victor. Really cool looking car from my perspective, quite hot roddy, I suppose. But it's supposed to be like a total beast to drive. It's kind of like it's a manual gearbox again. You've got the V12. It's a total brute, an old school brute. So that, I think, if you're going to put, me to put money on what I would like to see and what possibly think we might see in Bond 26 would be having new Bond in Bond number 7 in an Aston Martin Valor. I think that would be really cool. But then again, they might get Marek Reichman to build, a totally bespoke car like they did with the DB10 for Spectre. There might be something in the production line that the director or the Eon Productions will say, oh, what's that? Can we get that in the film? Can we adapt that for film use? Maybe that's what they could do. But if they're going to go down at Aston Martin, I think the Aston Martin Valor would be cool. But prefacing all of this, all the discussions we're going to have today as well, Brian, is we don't know what direction they're going to take with the new film. I mean, are they going to go old school? Some people have been saying we should take Bond back to the Fleming originals and set back in the 50s, early 60s or whatever, and have the film set there. And then therefore all bets are off, but he put in an Aston Martin DB2 or DB3 maybe. Or are they going to have Bond as a schoolboy, or just coming out of school, going into the Navy, maybe just leaving the Navy, leaving the SBS maybe? So it's all to do with how they're going to weave in the new stories. So I would say keep the powder dry, but potentially put Bond in an Aston Martin Valor, very cool, and have a Lotus Esprit, a Turbo Esprit in the garage as his kind of like personal car. But oh, I've got to stop talking. Sorry, Brian. But those are my thoughts. Well, I mean, what do you think? What would you like to see him driving?
The funny thing you mentioned electrical, 100%. It's crazy how much it has taken over the universe, I should say. Amazon is now technically the new shareholder of MGM.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We saw Amazon's branding on 007 Road to Million this winter, I should say, or early or late fall.
Yeah.
And we honestly don't know what Amazon and Eon are both going to say during these meetings. Are they going to say, well, we could go back to Lotus, and yes, they are electrical now. And of course, most of the United States is very green. So they could be promoting heavily on the electrical side.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Eon may come back with a counter and say, no, that's not Bond. Yeah, we had the Valhalla in the backdrop of No Time to Die, but Bond didn't drive it. It was just sitting there as a promo car and to get attention from Aston Martin and of course, as a backdrop, and it didn't get used at all. So who knows where we'll go.
Yeah, we'll have to watch this space. I mean, it's fascinating, but I think as an overall, I mean, Bond and Aston Martin are such a perfect pairing, aren't they? They really do gel well together. And obviously, even Aston Martin, they kind of a gentle nod. Their kind of bespoke division is called the Q division. So when they have like special orders or whatever, they go to Q division. So it's like the Q department. So they are kind of like meshed together. So I'd be very surprised if Aston Martin don't at least have some part in giving Bond number 7 his set of wheels.
And for all we know, it could be a special combination of either electric and petrol, like you said. Who
I
knows?
mean, if they
We
go,
could see a jack of all trades here for the very first car of the brand new Bond film with the brand new Bond.
well, yeah, I mean they could. I mean I think the Valhalla, and in fact the Valkyrie as well to a certain extent. That Valhalla has got a hybrid powertrain. I think it's supposed to anyway. So I think it's got partial electric power anyway. So Bond could be going, greener sooner than we think if he does go down that route.
Clearly, it didn't work out so well for Daniel Craig after all. He didn't get a chance to see what that was like.
I know. I don't know if it's still true, but I mean there was the old kind of rumor that he could go into any Aston Martin dealership and say, "I'll have that one, please," and be able to just be given the keys and drive out. I think that'd be quite a cool gig to have.
I just think sitting in one would be an ideal dream for me. I think if I've seen them countless on the streets, but just sitting in one would. I don't know what would happen, but probably I would be shaking like saying, "Do not actually touch any of the buttons." Oh wait, nothing bad seriously going to happen. So
It is. I mean, I've been lucky enough to sit in a few of them. I sat in the DB10, the Spectre DB10. With the previous auction at Christie's, they had a Spectre auction, and I did a walk around of all the kind of like some of the props that were up for sale. And they had in the middle of the room, they had the DB10, and I sat in it before the film actually had launched, and I could see that the actual ejector, the eject kind of flick up button on the gear stick. It was amazing to be able to sit there in the actual seat of the hero car, that was used in the driving scenes, driving with Daniel Craig in. It was just very cool and a beautiful car. But yeah, so it is a special place. So we'll try and sort something out next time you're over in the UK. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've got one friend who lives locally to me. He's got an Aston Martin DBS, in fact, that I've used in a few of my videos. For my pre-titles bits, we sometimes have to have an Aston Martin, and he's very kind in letting me drive it. So we'll try and sort something out for you when you come across, Brown.
oh, that would be ideally, man. I would absolutely thank you from the bottom of my heart for
Oh, no
any
problem.
of the warm reception that you send my way and say, hey, you're making one Bond fan's dream come true. So I would truly be appreciative
Well, we'll
of
see
it.
what we can do. We'll see what we can do.
Now let's move on to suiting. This is going to be a fun one for you, Blair, because I know you're so fascinated about it. Brioni versus Tom Ford. Now, Blair, Brioni was, of course, the suit maker for Pierce Brosnan from Goldeneye to Die Another Day. And then Daniel Craig wore Brioni in just one film, and that was Casino Royale. Then they moved to Tom Ford in Quantum of Solace. Though to the end of his tenure, now I think the tailoring and fit for Quantum was just right, but I also think switching from Brioni to Tom Ford directly after Quantum, especially when it takes place just hours after Casino Royale, was ridiculous.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it was a bit jarring continuity wise, wasn't it? It was really bizarre how they changed suiting, changed ties. I mean, very similar, but obviously not the same tailor. But if you're saying moving forward, should we go for Tom Ford or should we go for Brioni? I don't know. I think Brioni, I mean, obviously it was chosen by the costume designer. So Lindy Hemming is really Brioni as opposed to maybe Gianni Tamim for Tom Ford, possibly. But it's come down really to, as you say, Brosnan, Brioni, and Tom Ford, Craig. For me, I think that's the way it should stay. I don't think we should choose one or the other for the next Bond, for Bond number 7. I think Tom Ford was really, Daniel Craig really owned Tom Ford in that respect, and Brioni was brilliant for Pierce Brosnan. Obviously, the suit, the tux that Daniel Craig wore in Casino Royale was Brioni, and some of the other suiting as well. But I don't know. I mean, Brioni is obviously very Italian, sort of softer, and the Tom Ford is much more sort of heavy and structured and almost like armor almost. Personally, I've got a lot of Tom Ford. I've got that black suit that Craig wears in the desert scenes. Is one of my favorite suits. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it's eye-wateringly expensive, obviously. So my bank man doesn't thank me for having so much Tom Ford in my wardrobe. So I think for Bond number 7, for Bond 26, film wise, they should have a different designer completely. I think they should go for someone British potentially, maybe Dunhill. It needs to be someone who's got a global reach, and the budgets and the pockets to be able to do to clothe, not just clothe Bond. I mean, when I spoke to Gianni Tamim, they had to make 75 suits for that opening pre-title sequence and different levels of distress, on top of the train and the fight sequence and the bikes and stuff, for the stuntmen as well. But they have to have, different levels of distress and, padding areas for the stuntmen and so on and so forth. So any designer now, moving forward for the next film, the next part of the franchise, is going to have to be able to produce suits in quantity, have the quality obviously as well. It has to be contemporary British, as far not British traditional, but British contemporary. I think using British materials. So Dunhill would tick those boxes. Timothy Everest, I think, would be great. I was talking to Pete Brooker from Tailors with Love, and also Matt Spazer from Suits of James Bond about this. And I think we need to move to a different tailor. I think that I mean, I saw a very, very interesting and very funny interview that Pete Brooker did with Timothy Everest about. There's a piece he was saying that they had for Skyfall. They had Sam Mendes had got Daniel Craig and Ray Fiennes suited and booted in a suit, sitting down, chatting to each other. And Gianni Tamim came in and met Sam Mendes. Said to her, Ray Fiennes looks really, really elegant, doesn't he? And Ray Fiennes kind of like was jousting with Daniel Craig, saying, he did unbutton one of his cuffs and said, why, Janet Beams, why was he looking so elegant? And Ray Fiennes unbuttons his cuff and goes, "Well, simple, my suits are bespoke." And then Daniel Craig was rushed off to the wardrobe department saying, "Are my Tom Ford suits bespoke? Are they bespoke? Are they bespoke?" So I think, as I say, the suits have to be contemporary. Timothy Everest would suit that. British modern, not British traditional. British fabrics, contemporary fabrics. I mean, it also again depends on which direction they're going to go. Are they going to go into the to having Bond back in the 50s and 60s? Therefore, would they do something like they did in this with the suits from Man from Uncle? Where they actually used contemporary designers, but with a kind of like a flavor of the 60s. So they had Cavill in Chiffonelli, for example. That could work. I mean, they had Ralph Lauren jacket that the guy wore. It could work. But I think, I mean, seeing Daniel Craig and Anderson Shepherd, I mean, I think the tailoring, Anderson Shepherd's brilliant. I mean, amazing tailors, but I think the work they did with Daniel Craig, I mean, the pink tuxedo he wore for the premiere, it was just so badly fitting. I just think it was terrible. And also he wore that sky blue double-breasted suit for his when he had his Walk of Fame thing in Hollywood. And I just thought it was, how can they make a suit look so bad and ill-fitting? So I don't know. I think they need to go for maybe Xenia. No, it's not British, but a Xenia kind of like something like Xenia could work as well. But I think that Brioni belongs to Brosnan. Tom Ford belongs to Daniel Craig. So I think we need a new designer, some fresh blood, but it's got to be British and it's got to be contemporary to make it all flow together nicely. But those are my thoughts. I mean, what about you? I know you're a Brioni kind of guy, though, aren't you?
I am, and especially the fact that I'm a huge Pierce Brosnan fan. Like
Sure,
Brosnan
sure.
was my Bond, growing up. Um, but going back to what you've also said about Tom Ford, Tom Ford was meant for Daniel. Daniel's suits were very tight fitting, more slim fitting suits, and honestly, going forward now, I don't think you could do a slim fitting suit, and especially given the fact on whoever you cast. Like, if you're gonna cast like Henry Cavill,
Mhm.
he's not a slim fitting guy. He's more muscular and broader through the chest than Daniel Craig was.
Sure.
You, that's where Brioni could potentially come in. Brioni's suits were really, baggier per se, and
Yeah.
they fit Pierce really well.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Brioni also, I think, has worked with like Henry Cavill on some like promos or uh like just even premieres that he was part of. And I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't hold me against that.
Mhm.
But the tight fitting suits I think need to go away. And
Sure.
especially I think especially going Tom Ford needs to go out the door, and we need to wipe the slate clean. So what you have mentioned, I would probably, yeah, have to totally agree with. Like, where do we go? We don't know. That's going to be left up to W. McWilliams, Greg Wilson, Michael G. Wilson, and Barbara Broccoli. Let's leave it up to them and go from there.
Brioni was great because they would literally. I remember Linda Hemming talking about. I mean, Brioni were fantastic because they would do absolutely. They'd be so accommodating. So if they wanted like a jacket with 13 pockets or be able to zip open the back or open the back or have they were brilliant for that. Whether they'll be able to keep up nowadays because they have to have so many suits now, I don't know. But obviously, I do like the softer, lighter, kind of cut and drape that the Brioni suits have. And Pierce Brosnan did look absolutely epic against I mean, but you got so Brioni is purely Italian in the styling, whereas Tom Ford is influenced by English tailoring. It's quite stiff and heavy, but I mean, I'm a Tom Ford fan, but it is eye-wateringly expensive. Mind you, Brioni's not cheap either, obviously as well. But I do think we need fresh blood, so I'm putting Dunhill or Xenia their hats in the ring for Bond 26. Something new, fresh blood, something new, and yeah, but mix it up a bit as well, but definitely keeping it British and definitely keeping it contemporary, not traditional.
And I'm gonna close my thoughts on this. Now, I wouldn't be opposed of seeing Turnbull and Nasser, come back for shirt
I
making.
was going to
I
say Turnbull Nasser, yeah.
I could see, oof. Yeah, I think honestly, Dunhill is a fantastic brand. You got a really great idea right there. As long as we see a different direction, it may be the best option.
I think you're right. I mean, the thing Turnbull and Asser always kind of famously said they never give away free shirts. I think they changed their tune when they saw, how much, because they do get a lot of. I mean, they're wonderful people, and I love, going to their both their stores, in St James's, um, and I've got. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a few Turnbull and Nasser shirts in my wardrobe. And it was seeing the shirts being made and seeing the journey and getting measured up, and it's just an experience if you ever get the chance to do it. And even if you just go to be measured up, it's an amazing kind of experience. It's like a hallowed turf, really, a bit like Lock and Co is for hats. um so yeah, I mean, Tom Ford did have to do the shirts for a while because Terminal NASA said, like, you have to pay if you want to use our shirts. But I think that even evening shirts as well they didn't use for a while, in the Daniel Craig era. But they are the best shirt makers in the world. They are so. I mean, obviously going back all the way back to the cocktail cuff, the 3-button turn back cuff from Doctor No goes all the way back then. So the history with Terminal NASA. So I really do hope that they are involved in Bond 26. I think you're absolutely right. I think it'd be it just keeps a bit like Aston Martin. There's certain touchstones you need to have with a Bond film, and Terminal NASA is one of them. So yeah, let's keep it trad Brit.
Yeah, it's like the tropes as well. You gotta
Yeah.
have them as well, and it's the certain key aspects, like you just mentioned. I should say, Aston Martin again. They've been solidified since Goldfinger.
Yeah,
Why not
absolutely.
do
So
it the same with the clothing?
yeah, I think it's right. I mean, as long as it's kind of like, I mean, with shirts, I mean, it's all to do with your collar, shape and so on. That evolves, and they've used different ones for different actors. But I mean, it's different with suiting, obviously, because you have the cuts of the suit depend on the era. And I mean, some of Roger Moore's suits are obviously quite way out there, but as long as you keep it contemporary, and the suits kind of do fit, that are contemporary, then there shouldn't be a problem, as long as it's a British company using British fabrics. I think it's a win-win.
Now moving on to the final topic, which is watches. Rolex versus Omega.
Omega, go Omega! Sorry.
Rolex was Bond's watch of choice, starting from Dr. No in 1962 up until Seiko took over in The Spy Who Loved Me. Tag Heuer had a short stint in Timothy Dalton's debut film, The Living Daylights, in 1987. Rolex then returned for his final film, License to Kill. Then finally, the debut of Omega in 1995 with Pierce Brosnan in Goldeneye, which continued through Daniel Craig's run as Bond. So, with all that in mind, do you think Omega should stick around? Because by the sound of it, it kind of does, Blair.
Well, I mean, for me, I think that I would, again. It depends on the era. If we're going to stick with contemporary era, and we're kind of like maybe take the Daniel Craig tenure as a sort of like a separate universe, but then go back to the Sean Connery to Pierce Brosnan timeline. So we're keeping it, I say, keeping it contemporary. Um, I do love Amiga, and I've got a couple of Amiga watches. I'm very lucky. I haven't got the newer ones. I haven't got the No Time to Die one. So if Amiga's out there and want to kind of like, yeah, we can work something out. But again, I think we should move things on. I think having an official watch partner, which happened obviously when Brosnan took over, with Amiga. I mean, I love their watches. I think the move away from Rolex. I think Rolex was considered a bit as a luxury brand, whereas Omega have more of a sort of military technical side of them, which I really on the gadgety aspect to them as well. I think they're quite innovative. I think they moved from Rolex to Amiga, not just because of the military and the naval aspect they wanted to enhance, but also in back, sort of it had quite a kind of yuppie, sort of city boy look to, feel to them. Rolex did, which they didn't really think chimed with James Bond, and it was a bit too flashy. And I like the old the old Rolexes. I mean, it didn't really come in. I think it came in after 10 books. I think there was an amazing letter I looked at before that, there was somebody who said that Bond should have a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, and then Fleming wrote this letter as if he was like a biographer. He used to do this. He used to say he was like, Bond 007's biographer. So he was saying that, that the Oyster Perpetual weighs about 6 ounces and would slow down the use of his left hand in combat. So basically, he was saying that in actual real life, Bond would actually use a relatively cheap expendable wristwatch with an expanding metal bracelet that can be slipped over his thumb to use as a knuckle duster. And so, he wouldn't actually have used a Rolex or an Omega or whatever. And basically, I think it was actually he gave in when he wrote on the Manchester Secret Service 5 years later, and he actually, he did put him in a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, but the expanding metal bracelet kind of like remained. So that did become a sort of thing. For me, though, Gavin's got a Rolex, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and I wore it, and it's not flashy, and it's lovely. I'm an Omega man, but Fleming himself had an Explorer 1016, didn't he? But for me, I think if we're going to assume that we're in the current timeline, Bond potentially, maybe they might do a reset and say has just left the Navy, maybe the SBS. Now the SBS they use watches now by a company called Cabot, the Cabot Watch Company. The SBS, they have a CWC, the Cabot Watch Company SBS Diver issue. It's very, very cool, not massively expensive either, but it's got true kind of like, coolness about it, military cool about it. So I think that would be a potential avenue to look down. So move away from Omega and Rolex, go to the CWC, maybe Bremont as well, because they have the military and intelligence services they provide watches for as well. So they'd be quite cool. But Omega also, back in 2007, they produced a special edition, because going back even further, the SAS back in 2003 had Breitling Avenger Seawolf watches that were commissioned for them. And the SBS thought, we should do the same thing. So they went to Omega because they were more kind of like naval. Back in 2007, they had a blue dialed Seamaster SBS special that was only given, I think they did 500 and something watches that were only given to people who are actively serving in the SBS, who are the badasses. I mean, even more than Delta Force or the Navy SEALs. They're like the Navy SEALs in Britain, but they are seriously badass. They can only be recruited from the Royal Marines, whereas the SAS can be from any particular part of the army. But the SBS really kick ass. Their motto is by strength and by guile. They're so cool. They're actually based in Poole, near where we got a place down in Poole. They're next kind of like harbour along is where they train. Anyway, I digress. But the SBS kind of commissioned from Omega these special blue dialed Seamasters with the by strength and by guile on the back, and it was very, very cool. So maybe Omega could still be tied in if they do the SBS kind of like idea for the new Bond coming out of the SBS and the Navy. But otherwise, potentially CWC, this Cabot Watch Company, or Bremont, maybe possible as well. Are you a Rolex guy or are you an Omega guy?
I liked it in Live and Let Die.
Oh,
Kind
yeah,
of had a mouthful for a sec. I
no
do
worries.
like the classic Submariner. I absolutely do. It was, and the Live and Let Die was probably one of the very first Bond films I saw. And just seeing the spinning dial was just absolutely, it's like, oh, that sold me as a, for one of the gadgets. It's like, oh man, my childhood right there.
Very
You
cool,
know,
very cool.
and they weren't very much, gadget laden until, if I recall, Live and Let Die. So If you jump forward now, here we go. 1995 comes around the corner. Pierce Brosnan's Bond, Goldeneye. What does his Omega have? It has a laser. It has, you know, it can detonate time bombs. It can do anything almost underneath the sun. And we see, it going on for many films after that. I'm personally still an Omega fan. After said, I gotta say that 100%. I would love to own, the classic blue Submariner uh or Seamaster, my bad, everybody.
Yeah, this one here,
Yeah.
this one,
Yes.
it is classic. I mean, that's the watch I fell in love with, and I was really lucky. My partner Rachel, she got it for me for a Christmas present. She had a contact, so we got she managed to get it for me amazingly, and I was like, oh my, it's absolutely my dream Bond watch. I just love the color, I love the style, I love the connections, and it's beautiful. So yeah, I count my blessings each and every day that I managed to get one. I do like the No Time to Die one as well. I like the Milano mesh kind of strap, and I like the brown patina, kind of like the look of it, the kind of aged patina. So if my numbers came up with the lottery, I'd probably get that one as well. But I think I've got the main. This one here is the watch that I wear it, and with all my goodies, I try to wear and use them. I'm not somebody who like has stuff stuck behind glass in a display cabinet, or it's squirreled away and never used. I like to wear stuff and use stuff that I've got that I'm fortunate enough to have, because otherwise, I'm not enjoying it. I'm just looking at it, and it's like they are pieces of art, I suppose, but I think that you should enjoy things. Otherwise, it's like having a bird in a cage. It's like you should let them free, and I think you should actually use them, and it should be enjoyed.
And you made clearly a good point there. They should not be sitting behind a cabinet and just been, oh look, I'm gonna either wear that one, I'm gonna either wear that one. No, but you got two kids. One day you can pass these down to them. You
Yeah,
got you got memories. Let alone like just being able to say, hey, I am wearing a James Bond watch on my wrist, and I've been, very fortunate that my partner went out of the way and actually bought me one.
it's a very good point. They are heirloom pieces. I mean, I'm under no illusions that that they are you know expensive, and but they are things you can pass down from generation to generation, and you're absolutely right. It's you don't take it with you, so when you leave this earth, so enjoy them now and then pass them on to the next generation, and they can be enjoyed, and they're built to last, so they will keep going longer than I will probably, so my kids will be able to enjoy them as well. So it's who gets
Absolutely.
which one. I think my daughter will probably get this one, probably because her wrist's probably going to be smaller. So I've got a Planet Ocean Omega as well, so that'll go to my son probably. But yeah, and I mean, yeah, I've got first world problems. I'm really sorry for sounding like I've got loads of nice things, but yes, they will be passed on, and they will be enjoyed by generations to come.
No, and that's how things like that should be, and especially with the younger generation. And if you have kids out there, that's to anybody that is listening to this. You may have the finer things in life, but you won't have them, later. You might as well pass them down to your next generation and then have them pass it down potentially. Or whatever happens with it, it happens. You can't take advantage of what you have at the moment.
Well, absolutely. I mean, but talking about next year. I mean, do you watch Bond films with your kids? I mean, my son Jack. GoldenEye is his film. He just like loves watching GoldenEye. He watched it like sort of 10 times in a one after the other. That's one thing I really must do. I've been meaning to jump off the Vazazka Dam and do the bungee jump. Um, I've kind of jumped out of planes and things, but I've never jumped. I've done bungee jumping before, but never off something so high. So I'd love to do that, but with a camera as well. Do the kind of like a 360 camera, and jump off with that. I think that'd be great. I've got all the jackets and stuff, so I definitely want to do it in, not cosplay, but wearing the kit.
Don't forget your piton gun.
Yeah, I need. Otherwise, I'll just bounce back up again. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've actually held one of the ones, the piton guns that was used. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't say who had it because it's I think Eon have got. I don't think Eon have got one of them anymore. Anyway, but it's but it's yeah. But I think that is one of my favorites pre-title sequences. The GoldenEye one is just, when I saw it in the cinema, I was like, oh my god, it's just amazing. And it's all done for real, obviously, as well. I mean, we kind of like, a lot of stuff these days is CGI'd or whatever, but when they did the plane off the top, and the guy on the motorbike actually going off, they actually did that in sync. It was like very cool.
Yeah, Wayne Michaels would be the one guy I would love to absolutely just talk to about that and just be like, what
Legend.
was going through your mind? Like, I've heard, the crane operator was going like across the shoulders, the
Oh
whole shebang. But Wayne Michaels, I would definitely love to pick his brain and actually hear his true inside thoughts. Like, what was going through your mind when you did that?
I was required to do a perfect swallow dive off the top of this dam from 700 feet. So I physically had to hold this position while hitting really an area in space that would enable me to track away from the wall all the time, and so limit the chances of me actually hitting the wall. People would walk along the top of this dam in absolute silence, and they'd tentatively peer over and go pale at the thought, because this dam was awe-inspiring. They have a trauma clinic ready, an emergency helicopter to rush you there if it all goes wrong. And the vision that sticks in my mind is standing up there, and they've got all the cameras up to speed, and the assistant's just about to give me action. And I could see out of the corner of my eye this little Italian crane driver who looks pale with fright at the thought of what I was doing. And just as I was about to go, he does the sign of the crucifix. And, you have to live with that sort of thing.
Well, Blair, I think we should wrap it up, and thank you once again for joining me on today's inaugural episode. I would be very much welcoming you back for future episodes if you're up for it.
Anytime, my friend. I'd be honored. It's been such a pleasure, and it's always great, chatting to you, and you've got a lovely family. So, if you want me back, if you have me back, I'd be leaped for the chance. So, thanks so much for having me on. I feel very privileged to be on your first episode.
Well, and dating back, let's go back. It's been a real honor. It really has, and um, you know, finally actually getting to talk like this, it made things a lot more easier. And I think we definitely have to come up with something good that we can truly collab on.
Anytime you name the day, and I'll be there. Don't worry. Anytime.